Yeah, but Canada's in the Cup, eh?
Yeah, they finished top of the group, qualifying for the World Cup. They look very good this year.
Yep, it's a pretty tough group, but it's Canada's in there. Yep.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see. Interesting to follow.
Sorry, it was right in the middle of my screen. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Judy Geller, Director of MetalCon, and I'm delighted to welcome you to MetalCon Live today. I'm here with Kaylin Burke at the controls, and today we are delighted to welcome Frank Stasiowski, our leader here at PSMJ Resources and also the co-founder of MetalCon. Along with Frank, we have Alex Carrick, who's Chief Economics at ConstructConnect, and Tony Bouquot, General Manager of the Metal Building Manufacturers Association. That's a mouthful, so we'll just call it the MBMA. They are here to help you blast past supply chain issues, talent shortages, price pressure, and other metal construction profit killers. But before I hand things off to Frank, just a heads up about MetalCon 2022. Registration is now open, and for a limited time, you can save an additional $20 on top of early bird prices when you race to register before May 15th. The Super Show for Metal and Construction and Design will feature hundreds of exhibits, all new education. We've got some great keynotes planned, and we're going to be announcing a lot more very, very soon. Also, be sure to mark your calendar for the next MetalCon Live, which will take place on April 20th at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. The topic is an important one. It's cladding safety in light of global fires. If you need any technical help, be sure to reach out to MetalCon support in the chat box. And don't forget to complete the post-webinar survey if you want to earn any AIA learning units for today's session. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Frank.
I think we might have had some technical issues there. Frank Stasiowski, take it away.
How are you, folks? Can you hear me? Tony, you can hear me. Okay, I'm getting no sound, so I can't hear you guys. So I don't know what happened, but I'm going to start. Welcome, everybody. It's good to see a whole bunch of people are here on this edition of the MetalCon Live. And today, obviously, we're talking about an important topic, supply chain and the economy. What's going on? I'm going to start off with a couple of minutes and then turn it over to Alex and Tony for some questions. For a couple of minutes, I want to talk about the economy. You know, over the last few weeks, 6 weeks, in fact, we've witnessed this war in Ukraine, and we have our next pandemic, essentially. 2 years ago, we all went through the pandemic and we got hit by that with all the things that brought with it. And now here we have this war, and the war is impacting our economy, no doubt. The biggest word I like to throw out there these days is the word uncertainty. We're in a state of mind where a lot of people have uncertainty about what's going to happen with the war. We've come out of uncertainty about what's going to happen with mandates and with masks and with COVID and all those things. And all of that is leading us to an uncertainty about our economy. Obviously, interest rates are now going up. We have our own US Fed committed to raising interest rates over the next 4 quarters. There's some uncertainty in that. What impact will it have on developers? What impact will it have on the building industry? How are we going to deal with that? So I think the biggest economic thing we're all thinking about right now is uncertainty, at a time when just about everybody listening to this and all of us are incredibly busy. All of our exhibitors that we talk to on MetalCon, very busy, more busy than they've been in the last 10 years. And I think when you hear the amount of work that's going on, the amount of construction that's going on, there are a couple of things I think about. The first thing I think about is that most of the construction projects are longer term than just the last 6 weeks. So all of the events that have occurred in the first 3 months of this year really have not impacted the construction industry yet. Projects were booked 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago. They're still in construction. People are still dealing with the supply chain problems, still dealing with trying to get other projects underway. And we're all dealing with all of the current work as opposed to what the future brings. My concern is that suddenly something is going to happen that's going to undermine the stability in the design and construction business. So I worry about that. That's my worry these days, is that the rising interest rates, the lack of available funds, if they're not there to support development, the lack of help to get work done, the lack of staff, all of this coupled with the supply chain, 6 months to a year can negatively impact the busyness we have right now. So I think in your own strategic planning, my first piece of advice is now is the time to think about the impact of these things as you meet, dealing with this incredible amount of work you have right now, but having an eye toward the future. Now, that's my opening on my feeling about the economy right now. Every day I get up and I look at the stock market and it's in limbo. I look at the bond market, it's in limbo. I look at the war and it's in uncertainty. I hear generals saying that it could go on for 3 and 4 years. And what's the impact of what it will do to us in the design and construction industry? I think we have to worry about that a little bit. I'm going to turn to our panelists. We have Alex Carrick, who's our economist, and Tony Bouquot, who really represents all the metal building construction industry out there, the Association of Metal Buildings. And when I ask them what they think about my first observation here, before we get into 7 or 9 or 10 ways to deal with supply chains and current situation, Alex, you agree with what I just said about the economy? Anything to add to it, subtract from it, or disagree with me on?
Well, I Frank, what you've said is bang on the money. Yeah, no, I'd have quite a bit to really kind of add to it if I can take a few minutes. The Russia invasion of Ukraine. Yeah. So I think really the big thing right now that people are wondering about is, will there be a recession? And Deutsche Bank was the first bank that came out and said that they thought that there would be a recession. And the US economy has been growing really incredibly strongly. One of the reasons that there's the shortages is because growth has been so strong. Like GDP growth is around 6% right now. And the long-term average since 2000 is 2%. And retail sales are through the roof, and there's been this huge pent-up demand that's being spent. But there are things that are worrisome to people. Interest rates are rising. Inflation's very strong. And then, of course, and affordability of houses is another thing that's got people worrying. They're not sure that they can buy houses. They want to buy houses. They're not sure that their kids are going to be able to buy houses. But the war in Ukraine, there's aspects of that that are really throwing a great deal more uncertainty into the mix. And it's not really overtly stated, but the intention of the United States and the West basically is to bankrupt Russia. If you think about the sanctions and the measures that have been taken, and the latest round of sanctions basically is to try and stop Russia from paying its debts. That's one of the things that's there. So what are the ties between the rest of the world and the Russian economy? And what's the exposure? And the exposure, it's substantial, but it's not as substantial as it would be with some other countries. Russia's not a huge economy. The size of the Russian economy is it's about the same as California or Canada. So on a GDP per capita basis, it's way lower, but it's still a sizable economy. So if Russia does go into default on its debts, there will be repercussions. So that's one of the things to really watch for. So there's these negatives: the Ukraine situation, the interest rates, the inflation. Commodity prices are increasing because we know that the price of oil has gone up because Russia supplies all this energy to Europe. But you got to look at these things from a flip side. If you've got prices increasing to a certain extent, that's an incentive for construction projects to go ahead. And that's in everything. That's appliances, it's steel, it's energy, it's commodities. There's already announcements about big new gold mining projects and potash projects and so on. So on the plus side, I don't think there's going to be a recession. I think there's going to be a lot of talk about it. But my expectation, my assessment at the moment is that there will not be a recession because there's been all this really strong pent-up demand. Savings rates went up to 30%. People are addicted to travel. They want to spend on travel. They want to spend on entertainment. So there are those motivations. But the other really interesting thing for the construction industry, I think, is that for the first time in a long time, there's a lot of big construction projects out there, a lot of big capital spending projects out there that are going to drive the economy. And a lot of these projects are not really optional. We know that the car manufacturers are going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars building EV plants. We know that the battery makers, and some of them are the car makers, but it's also companies like CATL out of China and Panasonic, and even Koch Industries is aligning itself with other companies to build big battery plants. And we know that there's huge investments coming in computer chip area. And in steel, even in steel, we've got Nucor and US Steel who have announced $3 billion projects each to build new facilities in Arkansas and Virginia. And
well, you can also add to that all the infrastructure work that's projected.
Well, there's infrastructure spending coming.
Sure.
And there's going to be spending on military projects. And then there's all these other engineering projects like hydrogen plants and cap and trade facilities and so on. So yeah, so I think it's going to be hard to disrail the strength that there is in the economy. And the
Well,
US,
for years I've said we're in the booming 20s. So I think
Yeah.
you're echoing what I've said years ago, that it's going to be the booming 20s, and we're going to go for another 10 years with this. Do you agree with that?
well, you know, you can have recessions. Deutsche Bank says that there's going to be recession. Other people are going to say that there's going to be recession because interest rates are going up, and real interest rates are still, but real interest rates are still quite low. But anyway, there's going to be people who will say that we're going to be in recession, but no, there's tons of things that are really quite good. Retail spending, people are spending like mad. People are addicted to travel. People forget this. Analysts forget this. Everybody I talk to wants to go somewhere. They want to get on a plane and go somewhere. Now that if the pandemic can get behind us, there's money that's going to be spent. Entertainment, concerts, dining out. We've started
Well,
to dine out. My wife and I have started.
Pent up demand for private jet travel. Talk about a sector of an industry. There are 4,000 people on a waiting list waiting to buy a NetJets card.
Yeah.
Think about that. 4,000 individuals want to buy a $300,000 jet card because they don't want to fly on commercial airlines because so many other people are on them. So I would tend to agree with you, right, in all of this stuff. But,
Frank, are you on that waiting list?
No, I'm not on the waiting list. Sorry. Are you there, Tony? I'm just checking, you know. I mean,
Not me, no.
Metal buildings industry is booming, so you know,
I will
guys
say,
ought to
Frank,
both
I
be
did
there.
jot down here, April the 6th, Alex says no recession. So I got it right here in writing, okay?
Oh, there you
Yeah,
go.
well, I'm sure this is going to come back to bite me for sure, because
Of course.
that's the way of these things. But as I say, there's just a lot of momentum out there, and
All
the
right, so now
US
what do you
economy.
do? I'm going to switch it a little bit because obviously we're here with MetalCon, and then Tony, I'm going to get your reaction to this too, Alex. You know, I mean, you're an exhibitor, and right now our exhibitors are so busy. The steel companies, the manufacturers, the fabricators, the roofers, everybody is busy. Why do you need to go and sell more stuff going into this if it's going to be automatic sales. I mean, the demand is much greater. When I think about the NetJets thing, how would you like to be a salesperson for NetJets? They don't have to sell anything. They have 4,000 people waiting to buy. So in the case of our industry, I don't think our industry really needs to have a sales staff and a support staff and everything else. They just need more workers to get the work done. What do you think about that?
Frank, I'll relay a personal story on that one, which is we recently upgraded our living room furniture, or at least in theory we did. So we donated our old furniture to my daughter, who bought her first house. God bless her, and that she actually found one. So we went out and with the intention of buying new furniture for that room. And the first thing the salesman said at the Lazy Boy store was, "That's wonderful. It'll be here this time next year." And that's just the state of things. Did it stop us from plunking down 50% on that furniture order? No, we still want the furniture. So they still have to have the salespeople and the infrastructure for doing that. And it's no different in the metal building industry. Regardless of where the lead times are and the backlogs are, the projects are going to be there. And as Alex said, some of these projects are ones, a good chunk of them are ones that have to happen. It's not discretionary, it's stuff that's going to happen. And so whether you can get it in 6 months or 3 months, or it's going to be 24 months, you're still going to go forward with that project. And we still need to be here to service those folks.
All right, Alex, any comment on that? You agree? I guess I better buy my Christmas presents now.
Yeah, no, well, that's the thing. There's just all this work that's it's the pent up demand, and yeah, no, I
Well, let me get
agree
into a
with-
couple of
I
the
agree with-
predictions. When I talk about our industry and I say, all right, what if you're a company now that's in the roofing business and you've got so much work, you've got a backlog of 3 years worth of roofing projects, you're not going to be able to touch some of those for 3 years. What do you do now? Especially when you look on the backside of it, you've got supply chain problems where even though you've got the customers, you may not be able to get the fasteners to do the roof projects you have because they're on back order for 16 weeks or something of that sort. A good for instance, in the warm up to this, I ordered a generator from Generac in December 2020. And here we are in April and May 2022, and I still don't have my generator. All right, so I tell people I'm 17 months into a 5-month renovation of our house. Okay. And everybody has that, and it's almost a joke, and everybody smiles, nobody's upset. Everybody kind of is accepting this supply chain problem right now. So, when I put together my notes for this, I said, all right, what do you do? What do you do if you're a company? Let me give you a couple of suggestions that I've got and see what your reaction to it is and whether you agree or disagree. The first thing I think is now's the time when every company really needs to look at its sales agreements with its vendors again and modify the terms of those agreements, because we're still using what I would call 1960s kind of contractual language to buy and sell stuff, where we expect that a vendor who's going to sell us fasteners, for instance, and gives us a delivery date of May 1st, is going to honor their delivery date. I think we now have to change our expectations and say we expect they won't honor their delivery date. So what kind of terms can we put into a contract that will help us as the customer to deal with our customers when these things don't get delivered? Because the people in the middle are the ones who are feeling most of this strain. And I've got a few things, Number one, if a delivery date is missed, I think with your vendors, you need to have a right to change vendors with no penalty whatsoever to you, but a penalty perhaps to the vendor that you're abandoning. You need to have a price reduction based on how late they are in delivery. And some of these things are going to be tough to negotiate with vendors because they may not take your job or your order if you try to get some of these terms into agreements. But I think you need to change your thinking about delivery dates, expectations, and everything within your contract and add terms that benefit you or at least protect you from some of these supply chain things. Would you both agree with that or disagree with that? Have you seen examples of that? Alex, any supply chain kind of examples of people doing that?
Oh yeah, no, I think what you're saying is you got to be faster on your feet. You got to be able to dance faster. You got to look at alternatives. You got to, if you're a company, you got to look at what you can substitute for the material that you're using. You got to look at how you can rearrange contracts in terms of if you got an owner who wants a project and then they know that they're going to give you that work. You ask for an early commitment letter from them, for example. And then based on that early commitment letter, you can order the material. There's going to be a whole new wave where people are going to be stockpiling their key components and their key inputs and so on, which is interesting because that means a further increase in demand for warehouse work, which is where a lot of the real construction activity has been during the pandemic. It was warehouse work for sales over the internet, but it's now warehouse work for storing product under bonded security and that sort of thing. But you're going to be looking to.
It's interesting the impact of these things, though, because like you said, if people start to pre-order and start to stockpile, then doesn't that exacerbate the supply chain problem? And I'll give you, for instance, my friend in the food business recommended to me 2 weeks ago. He said, buy pasta. I said, what?
Yeah.
He said, well, we're going to have a worldwide shortage of pasta by the summer. Yeah. So he said, you better stock up on pasta if you like pasta. Well, now all you got to do is get that out in the public and you're going to have a run on pasta and there won't be any on the shelves. It'll all be in people's cupboards and there'll be a supply problem.
Well, yeah, so, but you're asking in terms of what should you do as somebody who's running a company. Sure, it'll exacerbate the problem for the other guy, but not for you. So, and the other thing is maybe look for partnerships, joint venture partnerships, because maybe there's a company out there who's got stuff that you need and you've got stuff that they need and they're complementary. Their deficiencies may match your excesses, that sort of thing. And there's other things.
My point in all of this, Alex, is to tell our audience that they really need to go back and start re-looking at their contracts with vendors and changing them to reflect what's going on right now. And instead of using the same sales agreements that they've had over the last 10 or 15 years, add some things that give them better protections, more flexibility, rights to cancel, things that would help them in this kind of an environment with the supply chain.
Sure. And there are things like maximum price contracts. I mean, that's something that's being used. And then there's escalator clauses. Right. In previous times of rapid inflation, companies have used escalator clauses tied to things like the consumer price index. But I think you'd want to tie them to the producer price index. Right. And another one, when because I was telling you that I went to, I spoke live in Vancouver, and it's the first live thing that I've done in a long time. And when I went out there, on the way back, I bought Forbes magazine. And I'm always going through all these things. And Forbes had a terrific article on, and I'm not a regular reader of Forbes because I'm not here as a shill for Forbes, but they had a really interesting article on how a lot of companies and a lot of really big companies are getting into the use of blockchain technology. Now, I am no expert on blockchain technology, but we're doing a webinar to try and help people. And apparently blockchain is not just cryptocurrency. Like there's some of the big cryptocurrency outfits use blockchain, but then they don't use it for other things. But there's some of the cryptocurrencies, the way that they use it in blockchain, there's other applications for it. And I was pretty knocked out by how many companies are using it for logistics, because you mentioned that, well, here's the other thing. Obviously, if you're going to pay more money in one area for materials and there's shortages and you're going to pay more money and so on, companies have to look where they can cut costs in other areas. Right. And that means more adoption of high tech, like precision cutting to reduce waste, to reduce waste product, and software solutions for scheduling and anything high tech that you can use. So this is hard stuff, but that's what you got to do. You got to step live and then come up with these alternatives.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because one of my second points, there's 7 ways here, is artificial intelligence. And in our industry, where do we use robots, robotics, and artificial intelligence to start dealing with some of this labor shortage? We're running a program in 2 weeks out in California for the design industry. And what we're talking about is that within 10 years, half of the employees in design firms won't have a job because artificial intelligence will replace their job. There will be machines that will do what design professionals do. And my question within the industry, and it's really hard in the construction industry, we're still building things the way we did 100 years ago with labor and hammers. And sure, there are automated hammers and automated tools and things of that sort, but there's an awful lot of labor involved in every aspect of construction. So the question would be, where do we replace all that? And which individual, if I'm an individual company, how do I begin by investing in what I call artificial intelligence, robotics to replace people? Any thoughts on that? Any of your people doing that, Tony? Any of your people using robotics in the assembly of metal buildings?
So I wouldn't say in the assembly and the fabrication is where there's some gains to be made. And what we like to tell folks, and I was recently out at a retail conference. So, all the major retailers around the country were represented there. And we were talking about the advantages of using metal buildings for retail applications for stores. And one of the big things we talk about touches right on what you're saying there, Frank, which is that labor component, specifically that field labor component. And one of the advantages that a metal building brings versus things like tilled up concrete and traditional steel, conventional steel, is how much of the fabrication of the building is done in the controlled environment of a factory, such that it shows up on a truck, flatbed truck, and it's as simple as unloading the material, hoisting it up, bolting it together, and you're done. And everything is fabbed ahead of time so that the field labor is reduced as much as possible, which is one of the big challenging areas for labor are those craftspeople, right? There's, those folks who do that kind of stuff are aging out, and there's just not a lot of folks filling in behind them. So, that's the advantage there. In terms of the technology, one of the interesting things we have going at MBMA, and we actually have at our spring meeting coming up here in Tucson in a few weeks, we're going to have a demo of this as we've been working on a virtual reality tool for folks in the industry to be able to put on one of those goofy headsets and take a virtual walkthrough of a metal building, see how it goes together. If you see something up there in the rafters you want to take a look at, you put your hands out and float up there and take a closer look. You touch on this and it gives you a detailed view of that connection and tells you exactly what bolts are those, and maybe get back to our supply chain. It says what can you use there instead if that one's not available. But we'll be demoing that tool at our meeting here in a couple weeks in Tucson. So there are applications, but for sure construction has been kind of slow to adopt on the technology front.
So I want to be sensitive to our audience here listening to us, and we hear all these things, we read about all these things on what I would call a very high umbrella level over the industry. But if I'm an individual owner of a fabricator, or I'm an individual who's a contractor trying to deal with putting up metal buildings or even traditional buildings, how do I start to begin to attack getting information on what to do in my business with this? Because I think it's very easy for us to talk about a hypothetical universe, and everybody's seeing it. I mean, on CBS the other morning, they had the meta space discussion where everybody has the headsets on and they're now going to sell real estate in meta universe. Well, that's great for Elon Musk and all those guys, but I'm a contractor in Pennsylvania who's trying to make a living. My help keeps quitting. I can't find people. And everybody's saying invest in technology. Come on, give me a break. So what do I do? What's the ground level beginning that people should do to either, get into this, think about it, or do something?
So on the contractor side, I will tell you the one piece of technology that the price has come down on, and it's become, I think, a fairly common tool for contractors to either own or to have available to them, is the use of drone technology.
Right.
And drones nowadays, and it gets into the ability to see the big picture, the ability to monitor a construction project, the ability to sell a construction project. All those are made a lot easier with drones, and I think that technology has come around enough that even the smallest contractors are seeing the advantages of that.
Yeah.
So that's just one example, Frank.
Yeah,
Alex,
that's-
you have
You need to
something?
get a teenager who knows how to operate a drone for you.
There you go.
Alex?
Okay, specifically, you're looking for specific answers here. Okay, one, Ellis Dawn has announced they have gone public with a press release saying that any refugee arrivals from the Ukraine, that they will make every effort they can to hire them and put them to work. So
Excellent.
that's, it's not a whole answer, but it's a step.
Mhm.
Second, I got 3 points here. Okay. Second, that's so you won't cut me off before I
Oh, there you go. Sorry about that.
got 3 points. 3 points.
All right, excellent.
Second, what's my second point? Oh yeah, you can get online and you can listen to podcasts that talk specifically about technology and construction. There's JB Knowledge, which is run by James Benham, and it's called Contact Crew Podcast. That's what it talks about. Every week they got somebody on there who talks about applications of wearables and scheduling software for scheduling software solutions, and all the things, and precision cutting, and all the things that relate to how you can improve your business operations through the use of technology. Okay, my third point is I have a question for you. And this is me just showing off here. Do either of you own an Oculus? Have you bought yourself an Oculus? One of those
Answer is no.
virtual headsets.
I do not.
I don't personally, Alex, but we just purchased 3 of them for the association.
Fabulous, because one of my sons is in the music business and he writes music for virtual art installations, and he has to program the music into this Oculus. So we went out and we bought one. And again, here I am shilling for another company. I don't know what I'm doing here. But anyhow, so this thing's just freaking incredible. You put it on and honestly, you're in this meta universe or this other world entirely. And the applications of this, there's just no way that this isn't going to take off. And they're saying that if you know this and you're using it, now these are the big contractors who are doing it, but the biggest problem one of the biggest problems for the construction industry is mistakes and correcting mistakes, and the Oculus and being able to see the project laid out before you actually build it, and to be able to head off mistakes is a huge cost saver. So I really recommend that if you're in the business and you're interested in technology and you want to keep up with your kids and everything else, that you put $600 or whatever into buying one of these headsets, because you won't believe it when you put it on. And then you you don't have to take your family anywhere. Like you're talking about travel. Travel's expensive. I'm taking my family to Paris on this Oculus. That's what I'm doing. I'm saving all that
I
money.
love it.
Let us know how that works, Alex.
Yeah. Well, let me add a 4th point to this, because in terms of specifics, one of the things that was passed a few weeks ago by a United States Congress is they are going to allocate 35,000 new H-1B visas this summer. Now that's 35,000 more foreign laborers that can come into the workforce. Majority of those realistically are going to go into the hospitality business, where they're temporary workers in resorts and restaurants and things of that sort. But a percentage of those, you can use the H-1B visa program to go into getting labor for your job sites. So, you can bring people over from Ireland, England, any of the countries in Europe, and give them a 6-month visa to work in the United States. So please look into that right now as a source of labor. I think, these are the kind of things I think specifically that in the short term can help you with some of these short-term problems. The other thing I talk about when I talk about people, you can't afford to lose people these days. The worst thing in the world is for you to lose people from your workforce for any reason. So you really have to be on top of your current fringe benefits and your current culture as an organization. And I think what I'm seeing across the United States anyway, in our surveys, is that people want what I would call job freedom. Now, what do I mean by that? That's a big, broad umbrella term into which you put items like work from any place, because people want to be able to make their choice as to when they work, how they work, and what they work on. That's the ongoing millennial type of spirit right now. And they will quit if they don't feel the freedom to have the choice to do some of those things. Now, in construction, it's hard. You can't work virtually and put a roof together. You just can't do that. So but you have to think about your labor force. You've got to do everything you can do right now to keep your people and to avoid having to replace people. And I think not enough companies in our industry are paying attention to that. I had one CEO say, well, what do you do for motivating your people? He said, they have a job, don't they? They get overtime, don't they? Well, those are like 1930s statements. All right. So it's time for you to really work on every aspect of retaining people. Any thoughts on that, guys? Any things you've seen people do that are kind of interesting out of the box stuff?
Well, I have 3 points. The immigration. It's fine to take a stand against immigration, but there's unintended consequences. This is what you got to know. And the United States has moved, has been less friendly towards immigration. And this is what you have. You lose people, and you lose the laborers in the residential side of construction. So if you're more open to immigration, that's a source of more workers. Women in construction, like every time there's a conversation about the shortage of workers, there's talk about trying to attract more women into construction. And I think that's happening because it's become a really big topic. And there are a lot of women who have entered the workforce and they like it. They like the satisfaction in seeing the project that they built go up and so on. But there's still problems, like the attitude of their coworkers on the male side. They still don't feel like they're getting the respect. And the other thing that women really have a problem with in terms of getting into construction is a lack of opportunities for advancement, because that means promoting a woman above a crew of men. And that is a huge obstacle. And that's not right. And it's not fair. And the other one is that there are an awful lot of people, skilled people in construction, who retired during the pandemic because they saw the pandemic as a sort of a sign from above that this is the time to get, go and retire. And some of those people are going to find that retirement isn't all it's cracked up to be from a number of points of view, including earnings and boredom and interest and so on. There's only so many rounds of golf you can play and so much pinochle you can play. And
Now,
so
Alex,
making a pitch to get
room,
some of them back.
Yeah, in the chat room, somebody just came up with another thing, and that is the movement toward a 32-hour week as opposed to a 40-hour week. And the idea that people would work 4 days a week. And I think that fits into the package of what I would call freedom. People are wanting to determine their own work week. And if they need to work on a Sunday because they have it available, they want to work Sunday and not Tuesday or not Wednesday.
Yeah.
And reduce the number of hours and be more effective with the hours. So I think all of these things are hitting everybody out there all at once in an environment in which most of the owners of the businesses we deal with are all, above 50 years old and have come from what I would call a post-World War II management style, where they're not used to this new explosion of new ideas and new freedom. So I think it's a very interesting time from the point of view of our shift in labor and what labor means and what culture means in a company, especially in the construction industry. I didn't add that labor issue relative to females, but it's a very important one. I mean, it's critically important. There is a glass ceiling for females in the construction industry that's more than glass. I think it's a steel ceiling. And these ladies just can't get up there.
Now,
So,
all this ties back in, Frank. So I have a question for you guys. Alex, I'm going to put you on the spot here to ask you a question. Frank, you can answer too. What is in the US anyway? What's the largest of the generations?
Sorry.
Which generation is the largest?
Oh, well, okay, that's, I don't know. Because
it's the
because
millennials.
they've got all
Everything
these
is
got their,
quoted
like,
as
there's
the
Generation Z, Generation M, and so on.
Frank,
It's
Frank,
supposed
you
to
get,
be,
yeah,
it's
Frank,
supposed
you
to
nailed
be,
it. It's most people think it's the boomers, but it's not. The
Yeah.
millennials are bigger than the boomers.
yeah, millennials. It's the people born, but we've run out of letters in the alphabet. So
But the
millennials,
the millennials, they are
Yeah.
fairly new to the workforce. They're currently in the 25 to 40-year-old range, right?
Yep.
And as you said, Frank, they have a different set of expectations for what they want out of a career. And it's not the same stuff. It's not what your buddy or your cohort said about, oh, I gave him a job, didn't I? They don't want to hear that, and they'll go somewhere else. And there's plenty of opportunities elsewhere that
Well, you know,
the
to
32-hour
echo
work
that,
week and
gentlemen,
that remote work and all those things are the things they're looking for.
you know, you're
Yeah.
right on, Tony, because I think, you know, when I think of my 33-year-old son who now lives in Cody, Wyoming, and has had 10 jobs in the last 6 months or something like that, if he doesn't find something that suits him, he literally quits it. And they're all in that mindset. Everybody in his friend circle is in the mindset of saying, I want to write the book how I had 100 jobs in 100 months. And they have no loyalty to a company. Now, but what creates the loyalty? The reason I brought up that word culture is I think in the construction industry, other than the largest of the contractors, the largest of the suppliers, there's not an awful lot of time spent trying to define the kind of culture you have in a construction crew. People simply get on the crew. Some of them are union. They come that morning, they go home that night. They're not part of your crew next day. You know, there's not a lot of attention paid to this subject in the construction industry right now. And I really think it's something that's important that every owner of a business in the industry start to focus on. What's the culture of your team so you retain people, so you get some loyalty, so you get people wanting to stay with the team. And it's not about money, it's not about paying them more, it's about giving them this sense that they have control of their own destiny in the environment in which they're working. Whether it's the 32-hour week, the work from any place, we get pizza every day on the job site. I don't know what it is, but it's a whole bunch of cultural things that I don't think our industry is yet used to dealing with.
And if you throw in beyond the millennials, you throw in Generation Z, so the next group coming up, what's important to them is, use the term culture, but culture in terms of what does the company I work for believe in? And do they believe in the same things that I do? And that's a whole different animal. And that's one that I don't think many companies, associations, et cetera, have gotten their hands around on how to address that.
Well, our audience, I'm going to go out to the people that are listening here. And if you agree with this, send us a note on chat, whether you're an employee right now that's in this mix or an owner of a company, because I think there needs to be some more discussion on this in the industry to help to deal with the shortage of labor, retaining people, and with the supply chain issues. Because, people have to deal with all of these things. And if people get tired of it and they just quit, there's always another job. One of the things that's going on right now, there are so many jobs available in this industry. People do not have to stay with you. In the interest of time, let me move on a little bit, because I think there are a couple of other points I want to make. Now, better than ever, is the best time for everybody in our industry on every proposal you get to increase your pricing. I mean, there's no better time in the history of what we're doing right now, for all the reasons we're talking about, than to make sure that you are pricing up, not pricing down. If you lose a job because you've outpriced it, God love you, because you might have 3 other jobs that you're going to get anyway. All right. So do not ignore the issue of what I would call creative pricing right now, in a way that gets you better profitability and more flexibility. The other thing that you're seeing across the industry is that everybody, and I think, Tony, you mentioned this, or maybe Alex, you mentioned it, if you have to buy anything, You have to put 50% down now and wait, a year to get it, your furniture, Tony. Okay, on my generator, I had to pay 100% a year and a half ago, and I still don't have the damn generator, but they've got the money. So what happens in that kind of an environment? If you're not doing that with your customers, then there's something wrong right now. You have a better chance of doing that now than you've ever had in my lifetime. Alex, you agree with that?
I generally agree with it. I don't want to jump in there. There's some part of the problem for the construction industry is that there's a huge gap between bid prices, the bid prices that are going out there right now, and the
Yep.
cost of the inputs. If you look at the producer price index series on input costs, they're something like 25% year over year, and the bid prices are up 15% year over year. And then the latest labor numbers, the wage rate increases are 6% per year. So yeah, it's an opportunity to get prices up, and but I understand where companies want to get the work, and I understand that there's been a lot of companies that have left the industry because of the hard times during the pandemic and so on, and other companies that don't want to be accused of gouging. But yeah, but I don't know whether I want to be on the broadcast recommending huge construction price increases. So
Well, I also don't want to be on the broadcast being behind the inflation rate as we move forward, because if inflation keeps going the way it's going and we're not improving pricing, then we're behind. So that's my point more than anything.
Okay, so where this gets really interesting, to me as an economist, this gets really interesting is on the subject of forecasts. Because if you do a forecast of put in place construction or even construction starts, forever, we haven't really had to worry about constant dollars versus current dollars, or a deflator, a price deflator to use in terms of the forecasts and whether the increase is real or it's a nominal increase. And so there's no question that going forward, at least for a year or two, we're going to have to start paying a lot more attention to what the deflator should be. Because if you've got growth in terms of what government's saying in terms of construction activity, that's 10%, but it's all due to inflation, then you haven't really got growth. So that affects your assessment of how big the market is and so on. And right now, that 10% figure is sort of what it's looking like. It's looking like construction prices this year will probably be up something like 10% in terms of a price deflator, in terms of a price index that's used to apply against dollar volume of construction. So yeah,
Tony,
the price is big question, big issue.
Yeah, is that a topic that your industry is talking about, is pricing?
Well, yes.
For sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, so 3 points. No, I'm just kidding. That's your line, Alex. Pricing is definitely one of the things that occurred as you guys were talking. Alex, you've mentioned the producer price index a few times, and Frank, you were talking about changing the language of your contracts. Yeah, I was talking with one of our members' customers. So one of the big general contractor who does a lot of retail work, and they were talking about their contracts with their major retailers where they do multiple stores over the period of years. And the way they protect themselves on the pricing side with that is the pricing is all tied to the price index. And in that case, it's the LME, but it's specific to steel. But it's, here's your pricing, but if the index changes, the price changes with it. And that's how you can put pricing out there for multiple projects over multiple years and make sure you're covered. But it can also come back the other way if the index goes down, right?
Yeah, that's escalation contracts. So that used to be really common back in the early 80s and so on, escalation agreements.
Yeah, I saw a thing out in Colorado a few weeks ago. It's very interesting. A developer of condominiums putting up a large condominium complex, about 120 condos in a single building unit. And the way they're pricing them, they're going to sell a third of them that they're going to guarantee the price of now. They'll sell or take deposits on the second third, with the price being quoted 18 months from now. And then on the final, when the project is done, they're not going to quote the price until the project is supposedly done 3 years from now. So their pricing is to retain, to hold back based on what's going on in the housing industry, the increase in pricing, to hold back the pricing of their inventory in a 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 scheme. If you buy today, you can get the guaranteed price for the first third of the units. But the
You sure
second
that's
third-
not in Vegas?
Well,
Sounds like a little
it's
bit of a
not
gamble
really.
there.
It does sound like a gamble, but it's a
Yeah.
very interesting. I haven't heard this scheme before, and I thought it was a fascinating scheme
Yeah,
by a
yeah.
developer.
Well, there's going to
price their product.
be some legal things go on too, because there's condominiums where the developers are going back to people who put their money down on the condominiums and asking them for another $100,000.
Absolutely,
So it's
Yep.
going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
for sure, for sure. All right, well, in the interest of time, we have to let our audience go in a few minutes. Why don't we wrap it up with a few comments about the future? I'll have each of you give me a prediction as to where you think we're going to be by the time we get to MetalCon in Indianapolis. What's our industry going to look like 6 months from now? Because it's 6 months until we get to Indianapolis. So tell me what you think is going to happen over the next 6 months, both in the economy, in the demand, in any of this uncertainty that I talked about. You want to go first, Alex?
Sure, I'll go first. I think that's going to be pretty much the same as it is. And I think there's going to be more of these big projects that are going to be coming on stream, and people are really going to be people are going to be excited about a lot of these big projects. There's something about a big part of what will happen in 6 months is going to be what happens in the Ukraine-Russian situation. And what I find really interesting there, and this is off topic, I understand that. Oh, I got another point I want to make too, is that, in history, they always talk about generals fighting the past war. Okay, they always talk about these military colleges training military staff to fight the last war. And that's what Russia is doing over there. They're having a 1940s style trying to attempt a 1940s style takeover of Ukraine. But the rest of the world is fighting a whole different war. It's fighting a cyber war, it's fighting a sanctions, a financial measures war, and so on. And it's going to be really interesting to see which side prevails in this. And I think there's a good chance that the West will prevail, because if Russia really is brought to its knees financially, that's a different way that war will be fought from now on. Now, my second point is, people used to ask me what I thought was the most was the best career choice to make, and it used to always be able to say with perfect confidence, computer programming. That's not what I'm telling people now. What I'm telling people now is that there's a subject that you took in high school that you hated, but it's a tremendous advantage if you really start to pay attention to it. And that's chemistry, because everything going forward depends on chemistry. Green, the move to green means alloys going into steel, aluminum, changing the way cement is made. Lithium's being used in batteries. Do you know what lithium is? I don't know what lithium's from. Something called it's part
element
of some other spubanamine or something or other. And there's manganese, and there's all these chemicals. And who knows what these things are, but they're important because people have got niobium. There's a huge niobium mine that's going to be built in Nebraska. That's going to be, so you got to know about this stuff. Know your chemistry. Know your chemistry. Mark my words.
You'll be eating fake meat pretty soon that's made
Yes.
out of chemical.
Yes.
You
I
can buy it
agree
at
with
Wendy's
Tony.
already, Frank.
Right, I know. Tony, a few predictions from you, please.
So I think, when you're looking at 6 months, Frank, I think, Alex's first point of, I don't see it being all that different than now. I think that's true. I think there is so much uncertainty. You started with that word at the beginning of this hour, Frank. There's so much uncertainty. I don't think it's going to be settled, especially if you think about October, because what's happening in October, we are on the precipice of a midterm election here in the States. And there is going to be a lot on the line there in terms of who controls the legislative branch of the U.S. as well as all the state houses, and I think until all that is settled, a lot of people are going to be holding off on making any big decisions, company-wise, economics-wise. The other thing happening there in October is we'll be gearing up for the World Cup over here. These are the national scarves over here. These are the club scarves. So we'll be talking about World Cup at MetalCon. And Alex, to your point, my daughter who took all my living room furniture, she's a chemist. So I'm all set.
Wonderful.
Well, from that chemical point of view, I can tell you in Boston here, every project that's being done now seems to be a biotech lab going up like crazy around this entire city. They're turning hotels into biotech labs. The old Bullfinch Hotel near Fenway Park is becoming a biotech lab. So I would tend to agree with that. We're all going to be dealing with chemistry, or at least our ancestors will be, as they go forward. I don't know whether we're going to be around long enough to see the overall impact of this chemical transition that you predict, Alex. Well, look, thank you guys. This has been an interesting hour, and it always is. I enjoy bantering back and forth on some of these things. My belief is that I don't think anybody has what I would call the answer. I think what we're doing right now is observing what's going on, giving our best ideas and our best thoughts. And what I like to try to do, as I hope I have here, is bring it back to the audience and say, what should they do with this information? How should they act? What should they be doing today? So as we move forward to MetalCon 6 months from now, hopefully by the time we get to MetalCon, we're going to have in our panels and our education programs and in further MetalCon Lives, more discussion around some of these subjects. I think, this issue of uncertainty, this issue of Ukraine, I love what you said, Alex, about the cyber war versus the physical war. I think you're right on with that one. I think, and I also believe that we have the technology better than the Russians to beat them at their economy. So hopefully that will happen, because I think it's sad what's going on over there right now in this 1940s war. So thank you again. Thank you both. I can't wait to see you in person at MetalCon. And let's keep bantering back and forth. And to the audience, if you have any thoughts that we didn't cover today, or things you'd like to see or hear on MetalCon Live next time around, send them in.
And Frank, maybe next time we can arrange to have a millennial female here. Oh, hey, Kaylin.
Oh, there we go.
Hello. But I'm not in the
it.
construction industry, guys. I'm sorry. I can't speak to that.
There are some out there, when we go to MetalCon every year, I got to tell you, there are some woman-led fabricators and woman-led people in this industry that are doing a phenomenal job. And I think maybe it's time we need to focus on one of them and get them on the program. So I hear you, Tony. Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you all. Kaylin, you want to wrap it up and we'll go from there.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. A big special thank you to our panelists today, including Alex, Carrick, Tony Bouquot, and of course, the infamous Frank Stasiowski. Thank you, everyone, again. Do not hesitate to fill out that survey that you're going to receive in just a few minutes as soon as you end this. That way we can make sure you receive both your certificate of attendance, and if you are an AIA member, that way we can make sure you get your AIA credits. Thank you, everybody, again. We look forward to seeing you in our next one. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Very good.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Very good. Thank
Bye.
you. It was fun.
Yep.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.